You define the IPO as very successful, but the fact that the price increased at 56% the next day makes you feel it's very successful because you could have gotten a better price.
That's a knife in my stomach. I think we take the big picture look, and we believe it's been extremely successful. I think at the margin, we could have priced a couple of dollars better than what we had priced, but we were humbled in some way by the very, very tough environment out there, and we wanted to make sure that this was going to be a great success for the selling shareholders, but also for the new buying investors. Some of which I don't want to look at, but some of which I see in this room. That's a representative of an investor here in this room. So I think that sometimes if you want to be a perfectionist, there are many things that we could have done better, and probably we could have priced a little bit higher. But in the overall scheme of things, we're very happy with how things played out. So.
Nicolas, you know, when I hear you describe your business, which is very exciting, and of course the market acceptance can give you a lot of encouragement, but it does sound to me like you're doing a lot of different things. You know, the internet space, the internet arena is a very big arena. And how do you manage to be sure that you're always staying within your core competency and you're not just doing too much?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question, and that is something that we ask ourselves all the time. We truly believe that what we're doing is run for great businesses per se, but that are very, very synergistic with each other. There are many other things that we have thought of doing, and we discarded. We're also focused geographically on Latin America. We have at times thought about doing something somewhere else, but we always believe that Latin America is where we have great advantages, and we have the skills and the team, and we know how to operate in that environment. But particularly in terms of the businesses, payments is great per se, but it's also very complementary to the marketplace. It's very hard for someone to try to build a payments business off the ground if you don't have a marketplace, because we have millions of people that need to pay each other, and that's a great way to get the business started. If you don't have a marketplace, it's almost, I wouldn't say impossible, it's very tough to get a business in payments off the ground. Advertising is very complementary. We just have the inventory of eyeballs. We're just focusing more on leveraging that and getting more dollars. And classifieds is very similar in the way that you need to manage it from the way that we manage the marketplace. So for us, typically the bottleneck is our programming capabilities. And what they are working on, if they work on one or the other of our business segments, is very similar. What they need to do, the competencies that the programmers have to have. So I totally agree that you don't want to do more than you can do. You also don't want to do less than what you can do, and that's the balance that we're always struggling with finding. We're happy with our strategy now.
I had a question on your payments platform. See it as a great opportunity not only for it to complement your business, but also in terms of the remittance payments that flow, especially between the United States and several countries, but I'm sure also within Latin American countries. Yeah. So my question would be, what are you doing to mitigate sort of the currency exchange risk that would be implied by that model, and also the fraud, potential for fraud?
We are currently not in that business. Most of the transactions that happen using our payments platform happen within each one of the countries. But that's one of the businesses that we have looked at, and we think there are synergies with what we do. But typically, most of the flows go from the U.S. to Latin America. There are not too many flows going from Mexico to Brazil or Venezuela to Colombia. So to get that organized and off the ground, we would need to have some sort of leg in the U.S. To access the funds that need to go to Latin America. So we're not working on that, and it's not part of our pipeline, but eventually it's something very complementary to what we do. So whenever we get into that, we will have to figure out fraud and many other things in the same way that we had to figure that out for the marketplace or for the payments in each one of the countries, and we have figured it out. Yeah.
So my question is towards your core marketplace business. Can you share some insight about when you started building that community sort of thing? what are the observations that you had about the consumers over internet and how you scale up that community, marketplace community?
So what we've done is initially to get this off the ground and build the critical mass. There was a lot of word of mouth and a lot of PR efforts and trying to get this started. And very early on in the process, we started building a great online marketing program, which is basically our distribution channel. So we started doing deals with the large portals, the Yahoos and the Microsofts, and those would channel traffic to us. We built our own affiliate network. We have more than 100,000 small sites that are part of our network, and each one of them, it can be a golfing site or you name it, and we have banners of MercadoLibre there, and they derive traffic to us, and that's also a great way to start building the critical mass. Once you get liquidity and you have the buyers and the sellers coming to your site, it's very hard for someone else to get the liquidity in parallel to your marketplace. So I would say it's been a guerrilla effort in the early days, then a more sophisticated online marketing effort. We started also recruiting sellers to different types of initiatives. But at this point, we're the largest buyers of online media in Latin America. We're typically the number one client in Latin America for the Googles or the Yahoos or the local portals. And we also leverage our own affiliate program.
You said that you had figured out the fear that consumers have in Latin America of fraud when buying from someone else, and the fear that they have using credit cards and other online payment methods. So how have you done that?
That's a good question. I think there's a myth and a reality, and the reality that we learned is that there's not so much fear as we would have thought at the beginning. And the anecdote is always, if we had thought about that at the beginning, we would have never gotten this business started. But it got started, and people trusted each other in most cases, and things really went smoothly. However, obviously, we created a lot of systems to ensure that for the bad apples or the complicated cases, we had ways to prevent fraud or to give assurances to the buyers and the sellers. So one thing that we adopted is what eBay had done early on is the feedback system, which works. It's a very simple concept, but works very well. If you do a transaction and you get rated a negative, after a couple of negatives, you're exiled from the system. We do a lot of monitoring of the site. We have a large team of people, and we have very sophisticated software to monitor the site. And we can track transactions that don't sound good according to some parameters. So we study those, and typically we suspend the transaction. Then we bring it back online if it's a good transaction, or if we're not, we leave it. We don't allow that transaction to happen. We have, I think, a good way to conclude the answer is that we have a buyer protection program. If you buy something from someone and you get defrauded, we will refund you. And what we spend on this program is absolutely insignificant. That means that most cases get resolved by the buyers and the sellers. We don't have to go to our own resources to refund, because it very rarely happens that there is a problem in the platform.
What's the biggest pushback that you get from investors when you're traveling around, particularly American investors, trying to explain your story and explain the company? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think it depends on which type of investors. We got pushback at some points about the environment in Latin America, if the economy is going to be stable or not stable, how fast is it going to converge to the rates of penetration that you see in the US or Europe. But I would say in general, we got a lot of support from investors. We talked with many of the US investors that have invested in Google and eBay and Yahoo. They really understand our business model. They do all sorts of analysis. They basically take our numbers now and they compare them to eBay's or Yahoo's or Google's numbers 8 years back, and they in some way project what they could expect the evolution to be. So I would say along those lines, but overall, I think they were quite comfortable with what they saw.
So you obviously had to adhere
to a high standard of corporate governance to list on the NASDAQ. But I'm curious to hear your perspective for other Latin exchanges, how you view the effectiveness of voluntary adhesion to corporate governance standards, such as Novo Mercado in Brazil.
We looked at the Novo Mercado quite extensively before deciding to go to the NASDAQ. We think it's great. It's a great marketplace, and the standards there for what we understand and what we know are very high. They're not that different from what you see in the U.S. You don't have the Sarbanes-Oxley incremental level of scrutiny, but I would say overall it's quite good, and it operates very well. And I think that there have been hundreds of IPOs in Brazil over the last few years, and those make a lot of sense for Brazilian-based companies. In our case, we are a pan-regional company. We have headquarters in Argentina, our largest operation in Brazil. We are a U.S. company from a legal point of view. We finally decided that the NASDAQ made the most sense, but I think Novo Mercado works very well. Yeah.
As a follow-up question to Michelle, when you were thinking about which market to list in, I've read a lot of articles about foreign firms in particular, although you're sort of you're a U.S. firm, quasi-foreign firm, shying away now from the U.S. market because of Sarbanes-Oxley in particular. So I'd be curious to know, was the potential burden of having to do the compliance with Sarbanes-Oxley a factor in your decision?
Surely it was. We had to put many things in the balance, and at the end of the day, we thought that the NASDAQ made sense because of the type of investors that we wanted to interest, and also for legacy matters in MercadoLibre of how we had been structured initially. It made more sense to go the straight line and list in the NASDAQ. But we seriously considered listing in some of the European markets or the Novo Mercado in Brazil. We have estimated that being a public company for us costs us about $2 million per year in expenses. And this is the increment versus not being public. Probably if we were to list in the Novo Mercado in Brazil, it would also cost us a certain amount. But overall, it's $2 million. Last year, our net income was $10 million. So $2 million is a lot of money. And hopefully, most of these expenses are fixed, and over time, they will get diluted. But at this stage, it's a very expensive, ongoing, incremental expense.
I was just wondering, how did your team decide that this is the right time to IPO? Because you could have gone one more year, IPO'd before. What was the decision?
I would say before, I don't think we were ready. We were not profitable. We wanted to make sure that we had a solid track record. We had investors that had been with us since 1999 or 2000, so it was about the right time for allowing them to exit their investment. Typically, they would have invested earlier on. The time horizon is more like 5 years and not like 8 years, but the markets were not there. So it was a combination of the markets being there, some of the investors that were ready to leave and invest the money somewhere else. Some of the funds that had invested in MercadoLibre didn't exist anymore, so they just had this investment in MercadoLibre and nothing else. So a combination of the markets, maturity in the company. It's not science. It was like, this is the right time. Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned that you look at Latin America as a block because of the size of the GDP that the countries generate. But one might argue to effectively be a block, you need the free flow of goods and services among those countries. And so I was wondering if you could comment on the ease with which goods can flow from country to country and how that affects your market strategy.
Yeah. The block concept is really a great concept because it allows us to be ahead of China in the chart. Which I think, even though it's a little bit tricky, but still we think it's a very powerful concept, and most people are not aware of that, and particularly when you come to some parts of the world where China is so much in the minds of investors. They don't consider Latin America as a large market, and actually it is. In terms of the second part of the question, our markets are pretty much country-specific, and there's very, very limited inter-country trade. Most of the goods sold on our platform are consumer practicals or things that where it doesn't make a lot of sense for you, if you're sitting in Brazil, to buy it from a Mexican and pay shipping and custom duties. You can find it locally for better terms. What is traded, though, are unique things. So, for example, around the World Cup, someone in Mexico might be buying a soccer shirt from someone in Brazil or things like that, but more the anecdotal type of transactions, not something that has substance.
As a CFO, how has your job changed pre-IPO now?
I have gray hair now here, which I didn't have before. I would say it changed quite a bit. We are spending a lot of time now with investors, which in the past was not part of the job, or we just had to deal with 5 or 6 investors that were sitting on our board. Now we have hundreds of investors and analysts. That takes quite a bit of time. And then everything that goes around closing the quarters, having the numbers and the accounting done under certain standards. Now it's substantially tougher than before when we were a private company. And we were doing something else, and we were going to be a couple of days late with our reporting. Nobody cared. Now we have earnings release and conference calls and have to produce quite complex documents that we need to present to the SEC. So I would say it's changed quite a bit. Also, the size of the team has been growing quite a bit. When we got started, we had a few finance people in every country, and I was the corporate team by myself. And I was doing this, but also HR and legal and a few other things. And now we have incorporated more than 100 people in the team. So it's a lot more work, but also more team, fortunately. Yeah.
According to your presentation, you became profitable in 2005, and then real profit in 2006. And I was curious what the initial plan was. What did you think you would become profitable at what year?
I'd say the initial plan, probably it got burned somewhere, and we were not going to take it to the surface again. But in terms of the initial numbers, probably the way everything evolved was quite different from that. But I think that the right answer to your question is conceptually, I think everything evolved in the way that we had already foreseen. Maybe not the specific numbers, but the way that more people would come online, the way that people would trust each other. We would provide also the mechanisms, and people would buy from each other. We had thought initially that we would launch a payments business, and we did, that we would put together a good team, we would build a great technology. So I would say conceptually things happened really in the way that we had thought initially. What I can say for sure is that we never thought it would take us 8 years to get from where we started to where we are at now. Probably our thought was that everything was going to happen at a faster pace. But as you can see, we were very patient people. We stayed on board. We waited until the market was more mature, and that's how we got here.
You did a slide about fixed price sales. Can you just comment what type of seller uses your platform for fixed price sales?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's mostly small and medium-sized businesses. So it could be someone that has a small storefront in a street or in an avenue in Bogota or Mexico City, and they have just one store, and they start selling online, and they can really multiply their volume. They can access a national market rather than the people that walk through the door. Many people also start a business online, and they use us as our platform. We have many anecdotes of someone that was driving a taxi and started selling something online and gradually built a business and now has 20 employees and doesn't drive the taxi anymore and sells tennis rackets or you name it. So I don't remember the exact number, but there are tens of thousands of people that make all of their living or most of their living from selling on MercadoLibre. And then you have also the individual seller that might sell a used refrigerator, but that is not what makes the bulk of the volume.
So I work
thank you guys, because we would always point to you as like, look, Latin America is growing. And we had a similar Latin America bigger than China slide. Glad to see that. But I wanted to mention, like, one of the difficulties we had was we had offices in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, and we could kind of fit a local team and understand the local dynamic of the market and the legal situation and the governance. But it was harder for us to figure out how to grow sustainably in the smaller markets, which were also growing faster than those specific markets. So I'm wondering, how do you guys figure out each individual, Colombia, Bolivia, etc.?
What was the business in which you were?
Google. In Buenos Aires.
You're still, okay. I'm not sure. I think that initially we have been changing our tactics over the time. Initially, when money was accessible and everybody was expanding very fast, we had large offices in every country. We even had large offices in Colombia and Venezuela. The markets were not there, but we had large offices. When the bubble burst, we reacted very fast, faster than anybody else, and we restructured all those operations. We left a few people there, and we tried to centralize a lot of things out of Argentina and basically do the technology and the online marketing out of Argentina and do the local things out of the smaller markets. And we have been seeing them, how they have been evolving. Sometimes they evolve fast. Sometimes it takes a few years until they get some critical mass. But the overall trends, we see them as very positive. So if the penetration, I don't remember the exact number for some of the smaller countries, but it's 22% overall. Maybe a country is 10%. So we know that in 99 it was 3% overall. So we just need to wait a little bit more and plant our seeds and make sure that we are there. And the good thing is that most of these businesses are profitable, so they're making money, maybe not a lot of money, but we're going to wait. The driver still is for us Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina, where we make most of the revenues.
Other than an obvious reference point, what is eBay's role right now in the company, and how do you see that relationship going forward?
eBay is an 18.5% shareholder, our largest shareholder. For 5 years, we had a best practice sharing agreement and a non-compete agreement, so we interacted with them formally and quite consistently over the years. We learned a lot from them. We believe they learned a lot from us also in how we approach some situations or problems or things that were different than in the US and that they could take to some other countries in the world. For the last year and a half, we don't have any contractual agreement with them, but we have a good relationship with them. That's all for now. So they are a large shareholder. We interact with them. We are good partners in many ways, but not as intensive as it was before.
Okay, we've got time for one more question here.
Where do you plan to expand MercadoLibre next?
Where? Our focus has been Latin America. There are many countries that we don't currently cover. So we don't have any specific plans, but I would say the natural next step would be to go to some of the countries where we do not have an operation. And always the trade-off for us is if we're going to invest in development resources, should we invest the resources in going to the next country maybe that is not very large at this point in terms of internet, or should we add a new feature to the core marketplace that is going to have a huge impact? So that would be the trade-off for us. But I would say some of the other countries in the region would be natural for us.